All right, guess what time it is? Another project. Yep. Back in 2010, I built this flak truck captured by the Germans. It was a British CMP truck. And Italiari picked up the molds from Max, and I think it was Peerless Max. And I think now Miro Models had this. It's hard to get, and there's a European website here that had, you can buy all these different parts. Well, I wanted to remake this kit when I found this one at a model show. $10. All that was in the box was the truck. It came with a field gun, and that was missing. And this kit was made in 1975, so when I saw it, I was like, well, why don't I try to do it again? Well, I took off on another big adventure just like the last one. These kits were made, this kit actually was made in 1975. I was like 11 years old. No, I take that back. I was like 15 years old. Anyways, the kit's pretty crude, but I tell you, for 1975, I would have expected less. Now the tires that come with it are the small ones, and the reason I was redoing this was the main part of the vehicle that I did, the front end was wrong. And when I looked at the photographs again, and I actually say it in my step-by-step, and I went out and started trying to buy parts to replace all these wrong parts. So I bought these tires from Mirror Models, but they're too small. So that was my first problem. I started buying stuff to recreate this model in better than I did in 2010. That was my goal. So I saw that and I was like, no, these are too small. So that was my first problem I had. But I had bought some more stuff for it. I had to get the ammo boxes that are on the sides of the vehicle, and these came from Panzer Art, and I picked these up at the same place where I picked up decals for it, because I needed special decals because of the way these crosses were. Echelon has this set available for the Martyr 2 kit, and the crosses are, as I said, perfect. And it had those kill marks, because there's kill marks on the gun. So the 2CM Flak 30 from Das Berg was going to be the gun that I used on it, because the gun that I used on the last model I made in 2010 was just the Flak 38, which was not on that vehicle in the photos. I was like, all right, look, I can do this. Well, this kit here is really nice, except it's got a million little tiny parts, and I knew that this was going to take more time than probably the rest of the vehicle, but I had to deal with a lot of stuff on the main vehicle anyway, so we'll get into that a little bit later. So I started assembling the kit, and it's all in Japanese, of course, so I tried to print out some instructions online. You can get these at like ScaleMates, and just search for model kit, not decals, but instruction sheets, and you'll find places where people put them online. So I started assembling the Max kit of the CPM truck. I was going to, obviously start with the frame first, undercarriage, etc. So that's what I'm doing here. And, there's seam lines. There's a lot of cleanup on these older kits. Well, first of all, I had to cut away the front. And the front of the vehicle, if you want to get it right, looks to be like this British quad gun from Tamiya, which I went out and purchased too. And all I really used from that was the front end and the tires, because they're the right size. They're the big ones. So as you can see here, that's the Max kit cut and the quad truck cut. So I had to merge the two together and match them up. Well, that was going to be fun. I spent a lot of time looking at it, trying to fit. Where do I got to cut? What do I got to do? So finally, I said, we just gonna have to just start chewing into this thing. So I started cutting into it where I thought was going to be the closest to get this thing to match up and fit, merge together. At this point, there was a couple of times where I was ready to throw this kit away, but I got it to fit, and it's on there as good as I could. And you can see the larger tires looked correct in the photo. I've got some spaces there that I got to fill, but I filled those with Magic Sculpt. Then I learned that the bed was not wooden like the first one I worked on and cut it up to fit. It's a metal bed, and here's the metal bed, and if you look at the photos close, you can tell it is metal. Found these references online while I was looking everything up. Well, I was going to build the whole bed in styrene, and then I started cutting some styrene out. I was like, no, I'll just use some 10,000ths sheet styrene, and I'll just sandwich everything together that's already on there and keep everything square, and it's a lot less work, and I think it's going to look better. So like I said, after the third time I was going to throw this whole thing away, and after buying all the accessories and pieces, which made the $10 kit turn into over $100. But anyhow, I was determined to do it now. Now I was like, okay, I got that front to fit, so we're gonna finish this thing. So as you can see here, I started gluing on the sheet styrene, and here's the styrene I use, really thin. I think it's 10,000ths. Easy to work with. Glues on with liquid cement for plastic. So this was just a no-brainer to do it this way. I started cutting out strips from the styrene as well to start doing the reinforcements and the little gadgets and mountings and mounting furniture and whatever you want to call this stuff to go on it. And here is the pieces of plastic I started cutting out. I was like, nah, and they were too thick anyway to work on. So I was pretty pleased at this point. Okay, now we've got it really going. And I just thought, okay, I think I'm going to actually do it this time. So I had to make the doors because the doors aren't going to fit from either one of the kits. So I started doing those out of the sheet styrene as well, working just a little bit at a time, making patterns of, and then see if it fit, and if it didn't fit, trace it onto another piece until I got everything to fit as close as I could. Anything else, I was going to fill it with any kind of fillers. And here you can see we've got the doors, and they're going to go right in those spots there. And here's one already put in. So I've got that part done. Moving right along here, it was time for the ammo boxes. The ammo boxes, they're either welded on the side or you could lift them out of this, but to me, I guess they just sat in there, or they were welded on. I'm not sure. But those are on. And then I used some parts in my parts box for the handles on the door. And those worked out really well. And hinges I just made out of some sprue, round sprue that I had. And you can see here the model as it is so far. And there's the hinge that I just talked about. Those are easy to do. All right, the Flak gun, Dash Verk. Wow. Comes in a nice looking box and some nice looking instructions, but the instructions are compact and there's a lot of little parts. Teeny tiny parts. A little bit of photo etch, not much. And so what I do is I go in and I highlight all the parts on these small instructions so I don't have a visual mess to look at. I noticed 65 and 70 were reversed because I couldn't get them to fit right. So I finally figured that out. And then I was not going to glue this part on because I needed it to be able to turn, because I wasn't sure how this thing even was going to fit in the back of the bed, because last time I used a Flak 38 and it didn't fit and I had to point it out the back, put the figures in there as you saw in the photo. Here's some photo etch for the site, which is a lot better looking. As you can see, you got tiny, tiny assemblies. I mean, there's like 6 parts there. So I took off working on the kit. What I tried to do is just a little bit, like every hour, let the piece sit so it would set up and I wouldn't have a big mess if I tried to work on these little tiny parts, moving, breaking, coming unglued. So I've got it this far, and not so bad so far, except for those sightings. There's another thing here. It shows that little knob going in the center, but it goes on the side, as shown here. So these are things you got to really look at, take your time on when you're building kits like this. This is like a 72nd scale kit. Well, the kit doesn't come with shields, so I had to go out and buy something else. The 30 Flak 30 that comes with the Tagliari kits have it. So I found it on eBay for $14. Can you believe it? And I got instructions just to make sure I was looking at everything right. Found the instructions. One piece was missing on the shield. I'd made that out of sheet styrene. And I drilled some little holes for the shields to accept into the gun. And I was off to the races again. I couldn't believe it. I guess I was supposed to get this thing done right. Finished it up, and now it's all primed in Mr. Surfacer 1000. Just a thin coat. You can even see some of the yellow plastic showing through. So let's go back to 2010, back to the past. And let's talk about this a little bit here. I wanted to paint it similar, but not exactly. And so I looked at my old photos and tried to take a look at it, see what I did. So I was like, all right, let's start painting. So I hit the gun with Panzer Gray, and I put a little bit of Panzer Gray on the bottom, especially the bottom of that vehicle. And then I came in and mixed some colors for the yellow. I didn't want any Africa yellow because the truck probably wasn't painted African yellow. It was probably painted in some type of British mid-tone sandstone, whatever they called it. So I mixed these colors up here to get the color. And you can see here I sprayed a little bit on the gun that was painted like a Panzer Gray, so it would tie in together. Well, I was happy so far. So far, so good. Let's put the decals on. Decals from Echelon, they're always excellent. I recommend these. They're highly detailed. Lawrence Gaw, he just really details out and studies his reference. The markings for the gun were on there, the kill markings, and then I sprayed everything with clear flat Tamiya to seal everything in. You can see I used AK pins to just put in some color for the seats, and the steering wheel black. Wash time. I didn't want to do a dark wash, so I used a sienna color here. And that was purposely because I wanted it to stain the color that I had used, but I didn't want it to be too thick. So I'm putting it on here, and then I come back with my brush, and I will clear out some of the colors, so that way it doesn't just beat up on it. I just want them in the corners, but I also wanted it to change the tone a little bit of that acrylic, I guess, post shading that I put on, if you want to call it post shading. So that was added, and I used terpenoid and just mixed it with artist oils here. And I did the whole vehicle just like this, everywhere. You can see it starts changing the whole vehicle, gives it different tones, and that's what you want. You don't want monotone. So this is just a start because I'm going to add some more washes later. And the same thing was done to the gun. And you can see there's little spots and stuff, which I wanted those little spots from my airbrush. I held it further back to get that. I wanted that texture. And then, of course, my signature, turn it on its side and do the wheels, not the tires, just the wheels, and especially around the bolts. It's also you can see, change the tones in those wheels, and then the tires later I was going to address in a whole different way, but I didn't want this color on the tires. All right, we're gonna do a wash now of acrylics. I just started messing around with acrylic washes. I just used a black acrylic paint, Viejo, and mixed it with water. And I'm putting on I guess I'm gonna call this a pin wash just with the acrylics, because I didn't want to change the tones that I've already put with the oil wash. So now I'm going in and just picking out corners, cracks, around little pieces that stick out, and hitting those, and then pulling in any of the pigment that's pulling around any places away. I don't want the tide marks, so I just pull it away with the brush later. So here you can see I'm just adding it into the deep shadowed areas around small items like those handles, places in corners, cracks, anywhere where I wanted a deep shadow, because this is a very light colored vehicle in the desert, so I did not want it to be too dark in places. A lot of times I see modelers do North Africa, and the vehicles are very dark, and it just doesn't bring in the ambiance of the North Africa look to me. So I try to stay on the lighter side. There is places, I guess, in North Africa where there's darker mud, etc., but it just gives that feel of North Africa, I guess. And then I'll turn it on its side, and around the bolts and stuff I'm putting the same black wash right in there. And you know, this definitely changes up what I did earlier, just toning those the color, the base color, adding that oil wash changed the tone, and this just gets around the darker areas. I've never really messed around with acrylic washes that much, and I'm going to start messing around with them. I like kind of the difference that they make compared to the oils, or oils stain more. These just can go right around the bolts if you want. I looked at the photo real close. I didn't like how I did it so panzer gray on the Flak gun. So since the photo looked pretty light, I went in and mixed up the same color paint again, and I just hit the gun a little bit more with the airbrush because I wanted it lighter as the photo. And then of course I had to go back over and add that tone back on with the oil wash. So I did that, and then I had to do some chipping, and I just got some dark acrylic paint. I just mixed up a color. I actually mixed it. I just made like a really, really dark olive color. I didn't want brown. I didn't want umber. I didn't want black. I just did a really dark olive. And once I did that, then I did do another dark black. I mixed black with a little bit of a warm gray color that I had, and mixed those two together to make a wash for just the tires. And that's added on the tires just to change the tone up a little bit, but I still want the other color or tone showing through. That was achieved through all those airbrushings over the vehicle. And once this dried, was my final step in this whole process of weathering this kit. Yeah, I didn't do a ton of weathering on this, even though I think it looks weathered to me. But I wanted it to match the photo as good as possible. And the final step was I grind up some pastels in the colors that are already basically in the tones of my vehicle here. And you could also use pigments. That's basically the same thing as these pastels. I put them on dry. I scrub them into the tire like this. They're scrubbed in, and keep scrubbing them in. And once they're all finished, I've got it all around each tire. Then I'll even rub it some more with a really soft cloth, just to make sure I get all that pastel powder in there, and it's basically like ground in and rubbed into that finish that I did in the tire. And here's the completed model. I really appreciate everyone who is watching, commenting, subscribing. Everything that you guys have done is great. I really appreciate everything. So thanks for watching. Stay tuned.